Welcome to Across the Pitch. Let's get into it. Real Madrid's loss to Espanyol yesterday has sent shockwaves through the football world, and we need to talk about their serious issues. This wasn't just any defeat. This was a loss that exposed every crack in Carlo Ancelotti's system. Let's start with the most baffling aspect. Madrid had their full attacking arsenal back. Vinicius, Mbappe, Bellingham, and Rodrigo all on the pitch together. On paper, this should have been a demolition job. Instead, what we saw was possibly one of the most toothless Real Madrid performances in recent memory. Against an Espanyol side sitting in the relegation zone, Los Blancos managed to create just two clear-cut chances across 90 minutes. Two chances. Let that sink in. The attacking dysfunction was painful to watch. Players were static, movement was predictable, and there was a complete lack of chemistry between the front three. It's almost as if having all these stars back actually made Madrid worse. How is that even possible? We saw Vinicius looking lost, Mbappe isolated, and Rodrigo struggling to find any rhythm. This isn't just about one bad day at the office. This is about a systematic failure in how these players are being utilized. But the problems don't stop there. The injury to Rudiger is potentially season-defining. He's been Madrid's rock at the back, and now he's facing weeks on the sidelines with what looks like a serious hamstring injury. The timing couldn't be worse with the Manchester City Champions League clash looming. This injury wasn't just bad luck, it was predictable. Rudiger has been playing with injuries, pushing through the pain, and Ancelotti kept running him into the ground. Now, they're paying the price. Speaking of Ancelotti, let's talk about those substitutions. Or should I say, the lack thereof. The first change didn't come until the 80th minute. The 80th minute, in a game where nothing was working, where Madrid desperately needed a spark, Carlo sat there, arms crossed, watching his team struggle without making a single change. When he finally did make substitutions, he brings on a 39-year-old Modric. Where was Güler? Where was Endrick? Where was any sense of tactical innovation? The consistency issues are now impossible to ignore. One week, Madrid looks like world beaters. The next, they can't break down Espanyol. This isn't new. It's been the story of their season. But what's truly concerning is that these inconsistencies aren't just in results. They're in basic performance levels. The pressing isn't consistent. The build-up play isn't consistent. The defensive organization isn't consistent. And here's the really worrying part for Madrid fans. This isn't just a blip. These issues have been building for months. The reliance on individual brilliance rather than systematic solutions, the lack of tactical evolution, the stubborn resistance to using the full depth of the squad. It's all coming to a head at the worst possible time. With the Manchester City tie approaching in the Champions League, these problems couldn't have surfaced at a worse moment. If Madrid plays like this against City, we could be looking at not just a defeat, but a humiliation. The question now isn't just about this season. It's about whether Ancelotti is still the right man to lead this team forward. This isn't the Real Madrid we know. This isn't the Real Madrid that strikers fear and midfielders respect. This is a team in crisis, and something needs to change, fast. Let's switch gears for a second and talk about Liverpool. Their victory at Bournemouth wasn't just another 3 points. It was a statement of intent that has the Premier League on notice. Going to Bournemouth isn't easy anymore. This is a team that's beaten Manchester City, demolished Manchester United, and has made the Vitality Stadium a fortress. But Liverpool didn't just win. They controlled, dominated, and professionally dispatched a very good side. This is what champions do. At the heart of everything was Mohamed Salah. Let's just pause for a moment and appreciate what we're witnessing. He's now moved past Frank Lampard to become the 6th highest scorer in Premier League history. Think about that. A winger who came to England being called a Chelsea reject is now ahead of one of the greatest midfield goal scorers we've ever seen. His penalty was clinical, but that second goal, that was vintage Salah. The composure, the finish, the timing. Just when Bournemouth were threatening to get back into the game, he kills it dead. But this Liverpool performance was about so much more than just Salah. We need to talk about Alisson Becker, who made 2 absolutely crucial saves. The first, early in the second half, was world-class. The second, in the 92nd minute, was even better. This is what separates good teams from great ones. The ability to have a goalkeeper who can produce these moments even when he's had very little to do all game. The real revelation, though, was Ryan Gravenberch. Remember when people questioned whether Liverpool had replaced their midfield properly? Well, Gravenberch just put in a display that had everything. The statistics tell part of the story. 7 tackles won, 9 successful duels, 93% pass completion. But they don't tell you about the composure, the spatial awareness, the ability to turn out of trouble in tight spaces. This wasn't just good. This was prime Moussa Dembélé levels of press resistance. What makes this win even more impressive is the context. This was one of those fixtures that Arsenal fans had been pointing to, saying, this is where Liverpool will drop points. Instead, Liverpool now sit 9 points clear at the top of the table. 9 points. In January. That's not just a gap, that's a chasm. The most telling aspect of this performance wasn't the goals or the clean sheet, it was the game management. When Bournemouth had their spell in the second half, there was no panic. When they hit the post, there was no wobble. This Liverpool team has learned from past experiences. They're no longer the heavy metal football team that tries to outscore everyone. They can do the ugly things when needed, and they can do them well. What we're seeing now is a Liverpool team that has every component needed to win a title. They have the goal scorer in Salah, the creator in Alexander-Arnold, the rock at the back in Van Dijk, and now they have the midfield control they were missing last season. The scary thing for the rest of the league? They're doing this without even hitting top gear in many games. 9 points clear, an in-form Salah, a midfield clicking into place, and a defense that's looking increasingly solid. The question is no longer whether Liverpool can win the title. It's whether anyone can stop them. This wasn't just a win at Bournemouth. This was Liverpool laying down a marker. This was Liverpool saying, we're back, and we're here to stay. Now, it's always nice to see a team score 7, and what we witnessed at the City Ground wasn't just a victory. It was a seismic shift in how we need to view Nottingham Forest. This wasn't just a team beating Brighton. This was a complete dismantling of one of the Premier League's most respected footballing sides. 7-0. Let that sink in. 7 goals against a team that's known for their tactical sophistication. Let's start with Chris Wood, because my word, what a transformation we're seeing. This is a striker that many had written off, who was considered past his prime. Today, he didn't just score a hat trick, he put on a masterclass in number 9 play. The movement, the finishing, the link-up play, everything was perfect. This wasn't just about the goals. It was about how he created space for others, how he pressed from the front, how he made Brighton's defense look absolutely amateur. But we need to talk about Anthony Elanga. 3 assists in a single game. Remember when Manchester United let him go? Remember the raised eyebrows at the transfer fee? Well, who's laughing now? Elanga's performance today showed exactly why Nuno Santo wanted him. The pace, the directness, the decision-making in the final third, this was a winger playing at the absolute peak of his powers. Every time he got the ball, Brighton looked terrified. The counter-attacking football Forest displayed was something special. This wasn't just hit and hope. This was calculated, precise, and absolutely lethal. The speed of transition, the way they exploited space, the clinical nature of their finishing, it was like watching a team that had been playing this way together for years, not months. What makes this even more remarkable is how Forest have evolved. Remember, this is a team that was fighting relegation last season. Now they're genuinely in the conversation for Champions League football. And before anyone dismisses that as premature, look at the table. Look at the performances. Look at the consistency they're showing. The system Nuno has implemented deserves special praise. He's taken players that other teams didn't want or had given up on, and he's turned them into a cohesive unit that's capable of destroying top-level opposition. This isn't just good coaching. This is exceptional man management and tactical awareness. The scary thing for the rest of the league? This Forest team is still improving. They're still learning, still growing, still developing their understanding of each other. Morgan Gibbs-White is getting better with each game. The defensive unit is becoming more solid, and now they've added this ruthless streak in front of goal. We need to address the elephant in the room, though. Are Forest genuine contenders for European football? After today's performance, how can they not be? They've got the tactical setup, they've got the firepower, they've got the momentum, and most importantly, they've got a belief that seems unshakable. This victory wasn't just about the scoreline, it was about the manner of the performance. Forest didn't just beat Brighton, they outthought them, outfought them, and outclassed them in every department. The Premier League's romantic story of the season isn't just about a historic club surviving anymore. It's about a sleeping giant potentially awakening in spectacular fashion. And for those who might dismiss this as one exceptional performance, look at the pattern. Look at the results they're putting together. Look at the way they're playing. Look at the confidence running through the team. This isn't a fluke. This is the result of excellent planning, brilliant coaching, and players performing at their absolute peak. The Forest of old might be back, and they're not just here to make up the numbers. They're here to compete at the very top. Yesterday's matches have given us a masterclass in how different tactical approaches can make or break teams in modern football. Let's start with Nottingham Forest's counter-attacking masterpiece. What they're doing right now is absolutely brilliant in its simplicity, but here's the key thing most people are missing. It's only working because teams are still trying to play their own game against them. Think about it. Brighton came to the City Ground with their usual possession-based approach, high defensive line, full-backs pushing up, and Forest absolutely feasted on the space left behind. The genius of Forest's system is that they're not trying to reinvent the wheel. They're playing to their strengths: pace in transition, direct runners, clinical finishing. But here's what makes it special. Teams aren't adapting to them yet. They're still being treated like the newly promoted side of last season, not the tactical powerhouse they've become. Chris Wood isn't just scoring because he's in form. He's scoring because the system is perfectly set up for his style of play. Compare this to Real Madrid's struggles against Espanyol. When teams sit deep against Madrid, we're seeing a completely different story. They had all their attacking talent on the field: Vinicius, Mbappe, Bellingham, but they looked clueless against a well-organized defensive block. This is where tactical inflexibility becomes a real problem. Madrid have all this individual brilliance, but no systematic solution to break down a team that sits deep and stays compact. Liverpool's approach yesterday was absolutely fascinating because it showed how far they've evolved under Slot. This isn't the heavy metal football of years past. Against Bournemouth, we saw a team that knows exactly when to press high, when to drop off, when to control possession, and when to hit on the counter. The maturity in their game management is something we haven't seen from Liverpool before. They're no longer trying to blow teams away for 90 minutes. They're controlling games in different ways at different times. But let's talk about Brighton because their story is perhaps the most telling. Their possession-based approach has been found out, not because it's fundamentally flawed, but because they've become predictable. Teams know they'll try to play out from the back, they know they'll push their fullbacks high, and they know they'll leave spaces in transition. Against Forest, this predictability was ruthlessly exposed. What we're seeing is a fascinating evolution in the Premier League. The teams having success right now aren't necessarily the ones with the most sophisticated systems. They're the ones who understand their own strengths and weaknesses best. Forest aren't trying to be Manchester City. They're not trying to dominate possession or play intricate passing patterns. They've identified what they're good at, and they're doubling down on it. The real tactical lesson from yesterday is about adaptability. Liverpool showed it by managing different game states. Forest showed it by perfecting their counter-attacking approach. But teams like Real Madrid and Brighton showed what happens when you become tactically rigid and predictable. We're entering an era where tactical flexibility is becoming more important than any single system. It's not about having the best style anymore. It's about having the right style for your players and being able to adapt that style when necessary. The teams that understand this are the ones climbing the table, while those that don't are being found out, regardless of their reputation or resources. Yesterday's games has been a perfect example of how football at the highest level isn't just about having the best players. It's about having the right system and knowing exactly how and when to implement it. Let's talk about managers, because yesterday showed us exactly how crucial tactical leadership is in modern football. We've seen absolute masterclasses and complete disasters, and the contrast between these managers couldn't be more stark. The story of Nuno Santo at Nottingham Forest is nothing short of remarkable. Remember when he was at Tottenham? Remember how he was painted as this dinosaur who couldn't adapt to modern football? Well, look at him now. He's taken a Forest team that was struggling for identity and transformed them into one of the most exciting counter-attacking units in European football. But here's what's really impressive. He's done it by keeping things simple. Nuno hasn't tried to reinvent football. He hasn't come in talking about complex systems or revolutionary tactics. Instead, he's looked at his squad, identified their strengths, and built a system that maximizes what they're good at. The transformation of players like Chris Wood and Anthony Elanga isn't an accident. It's the result of a manager who understands how to put players in positions where they can succeed. On the flip side, we need to talk about Carlo Ancelotti, because what's happening at Real Madrid is becoming concerning. Yesterday's game against Espanyol was a tactical disaster. When you have Vinicius, Mbappe, Bellingham, and Rodrigo on the pitch and can't create clear chances, that's not a player problem. That's a system problem. The late substitutions, the lack of tactical adjustments, the predictability in attack, these are all coaching issues. But the biggest criticism of Ancelotti has to be his management of players like Güler and Endrick. You've got two of the most exciting young talents in world football sitting on your bench, and you're bringing on a 39-year-old Modric when you need a goal. This isn't just about one game. It's about a pattern of decisions that suggests Ancelotti might be losing his touch. Then we've got Arne Slot, who's showing us exactly what title-winning management looks like. The Liverpool we saw at Bournemouth wasn't the heavy metal football team of years past. This was a controlled, mature performance from a team that knows exactly what they're doing. He's built a team that can control games in different ways. And that's the mark of a truly elite manager. The most fascinating case study might be Fabian Hürzeler at Brighton. Yesterday's collapse against Forest exposed the limitations of his approach. Yes, the football is beautiful when it works, but what's the plan B? When teams figure out how to press your build-up play, what's the alternative? The best managers in the world have multiple ways to win games. Hürzeler's Brighton increasingly look like they only know one way to play. What we're learning is that modern football management isn't just about having a philosophy. It's about knowing when and how to adapt that philosophy. Nuno's succeeding because he's built a system that fits his players. Slot's succeeding because he's evolved his approach while maintaining his core principles. Ancelotti's struggling because he seems stuck in his ways, and Hürzeler's getting found out because he's become too predictable. The really interesting thing about management at this level is how quickly things can change. 4 months ago, people were questioning whether Nuno could still cut it at this level. Now he's being talked about as a potential manager of the year candidate. That's how quickly perceptions can shift when you get your tactical approach right. The lessons for other managers are clear. Understand your players' strengths. Build a system that maximizes those strengths, but always be ready to adapt when things aren't working. The managers who are succeeding right now are the ones who understand this balance between having a clear philosophy and being tactically flexible. Let's dive into some of the individual performances that defined yesterday, because we've witnessed some absolutely exceptional displays that deserve to be broken down in detail. First, we have to talk about Mohamed Salah. What he's doing right now isn't just good, it's historically significant. Moving past Frank Lampard to become the 6th highest scorer in Premier League history as a winger, that's absolutely ridiculous. But it's not just the records, it's how he's doing it. That second goal against Bournemouth was classic Salah. The composure, the finish, the timing of it, coming right when Liverpool needed it most. We're watching a player who isn't just great, he's defining an era. And Chris Wood. This is a player many had written off, who was considered past his prime. Yesterday, he didn't just score a hat trick against Brighton. He put on a masterclass in center forward play. His movement, his link-up play, his finishing, everything was perfect. What's fascinating about Wood is how he's proving that sometimes it's not about changing your game, it's about finding the right system for your skills. Under Nuno, he's not being asked to do anything fancy. He's just being asked to be Chris Wood, and it's working brilliantly. In midfield, Ryan Gravenberch put in what might be the most complete midfield performance we've seen this season. The statistics are impressive enough. 7 tackles, 9 successful duels, 93% pass completion, but they don't tell the whole story. What made his performance special was his ability to control the tempo of the game. The way he could turn out of pressure, his spatial awareness, his decision-making, this wasn't just good, this was world-class. Liverpool have found something special here. Anthony Elanga's transformation at Forest has been remarkable. 3 assists in one game tells part of the story, but it's his overall play that's really impressive. He's playing with a freedom we never saw at Manchester United, taking players on, making intelligent runs, and most importantly, making the right decisions in the final third. This is what happens when you put a talented player in a system that suits their strengths and give them the confidence to express themselves. And we can't forget about Alisson Becker. 2 absolutely crucial saves that basically won Liverpool the game. The first one, early in the second half, was world class, but the save in the 92nd minute was even better. What makes Alisson special isn't just his ability to make these saves, it's his ability to stay concentrated for 90 minutes when he might have very little to do. That's the mark of a truly elite goalkeeper. What's fascinating about all these performances is how they're all different types of excellence. Salah's consistent brilliance, Wood's renaissance, Gravenberch's control, Elanga's creativity, and Alisson's crucial interventions. They're all different facets of what makes football such a complex and beautiful game. But there's a common thread here. All these players are thriving because they're in systems that maximize their strengths. Wood isn't being asked to play like Haaland. Gravenberch isn't being asked to be the new Thiago. They're being asked to be the best versions of themselves. And that's what's leading to these exceptional performances. Yesterday has shown us that in modern football, individual brilliance still matters enormously, but it matters most when it's properly channeled within a system that understands and amplifies what makes each player special. The Premier League title race has taken a dramatic turn this weekend, and we need to talk about how the landscape has fundamentally shifted. Liverpool's win at Bournemouth hasn't just extended their lead, it's completely changed the psychology of this title race. 9 points clear at the top. Just let that sink in. Liverpool have opened up a gap that historically, at this stage of the season, is rarely overcome. But what makes this even more significant is the pressure it now puts on their rivals. Arsenal face Manchester City today in what's suddenly become a must-win game for both teams. Draw? Not good enough anymore. A point each? That just hands more advantage to Liverpool. The fascinating thing about Liverpool's position is that they've done this without even hitting top gear in many games. Against Bournemouth, they were professional rather than spectacular. That's the hallmark of champions, winning when you're not at your best. The scariest part for their rivals? Liverpool still have players to come back from injury, and they're only going to get better as the season progresses. But here's where it gets really interesting. We need to talk about Nottingham Forest. After that 7-0 demolition of Brighton, they're genuinely in the conversation for Champions League football. This isn't just a crazy theory anymore. Look at their form. Look at their performances. Look at their position in the table. They're playing with a freedom and confidence that makes them dangerous against any opponent. The potential implications for the traditional Big Six are massive. We could be looking at a scenario where multiple established Champions League regulars miss out. Chelsea are inconsistent. Manchester United are meh. Tottenham are faltering. Meanwhile, Forest, Bournemouth, and Newcastle are all showing they're capable of maintaining a serious challenge. The financial implications of Champions League qualification are enormous. Missing out doesn't just affect one season, it can set a club back years in terms of recruitment and development. That's why the pressure on Arsenal tomorrow is so intense. They know that losing to City wouldn't just damage their title hopes, it could start a slide that puts their top four position in jeopardy. What's particularly fascinating is how the different pressures are affecting these teams. Liverpool seem to be thriving under it, playing with a freedom that comes from having points on the board. Arsenal, on the other hand, carry the weight of last season's collapse. The next few weeks could be season defining. Liverpool have tough fixtures coming up, but they've built themselves a buffer. Arsenal need to prove they can handle the pressure of being chasers. City need to show they can still put together one of their famous winning runs. 5-for-5 at games don't seem so impossible. And teams like Forest need to prove they can maintain their form when the pressure really ramps up. This isn't just about who wins the title anymore. It's about a potential power shift in English football. The traditional hierarchy is under threat, and the next few months could reshape the Premier League landscape for years to come. Crazy thing is, Nottingham Forest are providing a masterclass in how to build a winning culture without the arrogance that often comes with success. This is a club with massive history, 2 European Cups, league titles, FA Cups, but they're approaching their current success with a refreshing humility. There's no talk of, we deserve this, or we belong here. Instead, there's a clear understanding of who they are and what they're trying to achieve. What makes Forest's approach so special is the alignment between the owners, manager, players, and fans. Everyone's bought into the same vision. They're not trying to be Manchester City or Arsenal. They're not trying to play possession football because it's trendy. They've identified their strengths, built a system around them, and most importantly, everyone's accepted this is who they are. Contrast this with Real Madrid's current situation. Here's a club with unmatched history, but they're suffering from an identity crisis. One week they're brilliant, the next they can't break down Espanyol. This inconsistency isn't just about form, it's about a disconnect between what the club thinks it should be and what it actually is right now. The pressure to play beautiful football while also getting results is creating a paralysis in decision-making. Liverpool are showing us what a champion's mentality really looks like. Their win at Bournemouth wasn't pretty, but it was professional. They're not trying to score 7 goals every week. They're not trying to dominate possession for 90 minutes. They've developed a pragmatic streak that shows real maturity. When they need to dig in, they dig in. When they need to control, they control. When they need to counter, they counter. This flexibility comes from confidence in who they are as a team. Brighton's situation is particularly interesting because they're suffering from what you might call cultural inflexibility. They've received so much praise for their style of play that they seem unable or unwilling to adapt when that style isn't working. There's almost an arrogance to it, a belief that their way is the right way, regardless of results. That 7-0 defeat to Forest wasn't just a tactical failure. It was a failure to respect that there are different ways to succeed in football. But there's a broader conversation to be had here about what creates a winning culture in modern football. It isn't about having the biggest stadium or the most expensive players anymore. It's about creating an environment where everyone, from the tea lady to the star striker, understands and believes in what the club is trying to achieve. Forest have created this. There's no infighting about style of play, no debates about whether they should be more expansive, no complaints about being too defensive. Everyone's pulling in the same direction. The fans aren't demanding champagne football. They're celebrating effective football. This is where some of the traditional powerhouses are falling short. They're trying to be everything to everyone. They want to play beautiful football and get results. They want to develop young players and win every trophy. They want to build for the future and succeed in the present. Sometimes clarity of purpose is more important than ambition. What we're learning is that success in modern football isn't just about what happens on the pitch. It's about creating a culture where everyone understands their role in the bigger picture. The clubs that are getting this right are the ones rising to the top, regardless of their history or resources. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate you. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, as engagement from you helps the channel grow. Comment below what you thought of the weekend's matches. This has been Across the Pitch, over and out.